Welcome to CDRE Spotlight. I am excited to have our guest, Melinda Elmer, who comes to us out of Long Beach, California. She's been a realtor for over 20 years. She's completed over 1,000 residential real estate transactions. Last year, she got her CDRE and she has advanced right up the ranks to become one of our leading CDRE mentors in our CDRE mentorship program. Had almost every type of award that you can get, including double Centurion, Grand Centurion. She's always ranked in the top 1% nationwide of realtors. Consistently named a top LGBT agent by the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. She is a coach, speaker, mentor. The thing I love about Melinda, she takes what she learns and she gives it all back and makes her world a better place. So welcome, Melinda. We're excited you're here.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
So Melinda, tell us a little bit about, first of all, about your business. What was your business like before you officially became a CDRE, your team, your structure, that sort of thing?
So I have a small team. It's myself and one buyer's agent and then a couple of admin. The market really changed, obviously, back in 2022. We went from crazy market with tons of offers on every showings to things slowing down and becoming a little bit more of a normal market. And I was looking at my business and almost all of my business was past clients, center of influence. And a lot of them kind of froze up and didn't want to move. And in the past, I had done expired listings and short sales and all of those kinds of things, but didn't focus on any of those things for many years because I was so well established in the business. Then I was looking at ways to really stabilize the business and make it less dependent upon the market and looking at sources that are more reliable, which frankly, divorce always happens and death always happens, right? So I was looking at those sources a little bit more closely and wanting to organize those a little bit and be more purposeful about going after that business. And when I started taking the CDRE program, I actually sat down with a bunch of the estate planning and trust attorneys that I've worked with for many years. And we knew each other on a friendly basis, but I never sat down with them and took them through my CV and all of my information. So a lot of what we learned in the Alumni Institute as a CDRE, I started applying to my estate planning and trust attorneys. And then I started using that, of course, with our divorce attorneys. So I was kind of using both and it helped to really expand my attorney business that I'm working with. That's been a huge asset to my business and making it a little bit more repeatable and duplicatable and knowing that it's another leg to my business adding on to my past clients, my center of influence, and now I have the attorney business coming in as well.
And so describe a little bit about your process from you decided you wanted to get into this because you've clearly amassed a vast amount of knowledge, skills, resources, and so forth. You were able to take what you know in real estate itself and then apply it to a niche that really needs it. And what would you say your experience was like kind of going through the program, and then how is your business impacted your business now?
You know, my very first divorce, especially high conflict divorce sale, was back in 2007. And I had a in-spouse who was living in the property, was a self-defense expert. He had weapons in the home. He had 2 big dogs in the home and security cameras all over the house. And he would not allow showings to happen. And this was 2007. The market was tanking and going down about 30% per month. So it was huge that we get the property sold as quickly as possible to preserve the equity. And the wife said, please come with me to court and testify that he's not allowing anybody in. And I said, well, absolutely, I'm happy to help. But I didn't ask for a subpoena. And so I walked in, I sat down to testify, and wife's attorney asked me a few questions. The husband was pro per. He stood up and said, she's not representing my interests. I want her removed from the listing. And magically, I was removed from the listing. So I thought to myself, there has to be a better way to do this. And then eventually, obviously, many years later, obviously, I found you. And I love the processes and the systems that are in place. I'm a huge systems person. So to me, it made sense. Like, here's the systems, here's the processes in order to avoid that. If I would have known what I know now, I would have sold that property and it would have limited a lot of the conflict that were happening between the parties. Now, conflict still might have been there, but I would have been able to help them move forward a little bit better in a stronger position. And I think that, I see that with even the lower conflict divorce cases, it gives me tools where, I just had an appointment this morning with a seller, and when I did the walkthrough, because both parties are still living in the home, neither one of them really said anything. They were very quiet. And as soon as I had the parties in separate locations, They just opened up to me and gave me a lot more information. Whereas before, I would have probably tried to do that appointment together, and I would have had a lot of more resistance from the two parties. So huge difference in systems.
And we need a lot of information when we're working with them. I mean, we need to know things like, what are their plans? Where are they going to be moving? What are their schedules? Because we've got to be able to coordinate, showings and access to the house and all sorts of different things. If we have them together and if they seize up because they don't want the other spouse to hear that, then there can be really important facts that we're not privy to that really would impact our ability to move forward. So it probably was a welcome that you got to have more transparency.
When I think about how many mistakes I made in the past of how I did things, I made two sellers meet me in person, and the one seller was in tears the whole time because it was the first time she was seeing her ex-husband in 6 months, and it was heartbreaking for her. And so she was just crying through the whole appointment. And that's no fun for anybody, right? And if I would have just known to do them separately, that would have been huge. Or knowing that it's a fair housing violation to disclose that they're going through divorce, right? I mean, you don't even think about that. And then learning that, now I hear other people disclose this, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it definitely opens your eyes and you realize what a niche this is. It's not just simply a pillar of business, but it's also a niche that needs to be mastered. There's a lot of ins and outs. So what advice would you give to somebody who is thinking about getting into the divorce space? Maybe they want to do it for the same reasons you chose to do it. Maybe they have been through a divorce themselves. There's a myriad of reasons why agents throughout the country want to get into this space. So what advice would you give to them?
I would say if you don't have a bit of a thick skin, it's probably not a good fit for you. If you're going to be one of those people that really takes in and internalizes all of the angst and conflict, don't do it, right?
Good advice.
You do have to have some mental separation, and I'm not certainly far from perfect in that. I want what's best for the clients, and I want to help them move things forward, and I'm always trying to figure things out. But I also can't take it personally when one of the spouses is lashing out at me, and I know logically it's not about me, it's about the situation that they're in. So I think you have to have enough business savvy to really separate that out and not internalize and take that personally on yourself. And it can be a great source of business. I also wouldn't say it's the lightest source of business either, right? There is a little bit of a heavier load. It is not something that is instantaneous either. I had a lot of success early because I already had some established relationships. I already had some things built in place, and I already had a really well-established business. If you're struggling in the business and you're trying to figure out where your next paycheck's coming from, this is not something that's cheap to get into either, right? It's something that takes time. It starts to build over time. And once you start establishing yourself, it really starts to come in. But don't expect that if you join and you get in that you're going to get business in the first 2 months. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's a long ramp up and a long investment, include not only financially, but time as well as personal development with it. I know because you and I work, Melinda, behind the scenes on a lot of your cases. We go, we brainstorm and mastermind, and there's no one who cares more about people. And yet it's important to have those boundaries so you can remain effective.
Absolutely.
And you do a really good job at that. So that's excellent advice. You've also been doing this long enough, both as a CDRE and prior to becoming a CDRE, that you've also seen what the impact of the process, the divorce process, can have on divorcing homeowners. So what advice would you give to divorcing homeowners as it relates to their real estate issues?
I went through my own divorce and sold my own property during the 2008. And, I think I bought my home for $550 and sold it for $350. Did a short sale, all those things, right? And we were both still living in the property at the time. So, I have a lot of empathy and can relate to a lot of people who are going through these situations. And at the same time, I think I had a huge benefit in that, to me, the house was not as emotional for me. And that's where I think divorcing homeowners, sometimes they get so blinded by the emotion, like this is where I raised my babies, or this is where, I've lived here for the last 30 years, this is my home, There are other homes out there, and as hard as that can be to hear, sometimes it's about looking at what the big picture financial situation or big picture is for your future and going forward. And some people try so hard to stay in that home, even if it's not the right decision for them. I see people leverage themselves way beyond what they can really afford, and then end up having to sell the house 6 months later anyway, because they went from having no payment or, $3,000 a year in taxes, and that was it, to now having a $3,000 a month payment. And they're retired. They can't afford that. Learn to look past, and it's hard when you're in the middle of a divorce, right? Because it's all about emotion. But learn to look past the emotion of the immediate moment and really, find that resource, have somebody who can walk through it and talk through it and see, does it make sense for the long term? Can you stay there for the long term? And if you can't, maybe it's time for that fresh start to wipe the slate clean, or maybe you have those orders that say you have to, and that there's going to be a new beginning for you, and that there's hope at the end of that tunnel. Letting go of that emotional side of things can make a huge difference.
That's really good. That's really good. A lot of times people see the house as a trophy.
Right.
Only as a trophy, right? And without looking at, like you said, looking at the big picture and looking at all of the costs and what that's going to do to impact their lifestyle and so forth as well. So that's really good advice, to look at the big picture and not get stuck in the weeds on these details and on winning.
Right.
Right. So similar question, Melinda. You've also been around and seen enough to know that divorce attorneys, they're always on a quest for knowledge as well. So what advice or what information do you think that divorce attorneys should know about real estate issues and handling them in their cases?
The biggest thing that I would give there is reach out to us early. There's CDREs in so many of the markets, and use us as a resource. And we can help look at all of those things that they may not be seeing. They can get super in the weeds about child support or restraining orders or division of other assets, not just the house, and that sometimes the house gets left as that afterthought. I was talking with an attorney the other day, and there was a huge issue with a house that we've been appointed to sell. And it basically means that the house would only sell for cash. And if the out spouse actually wanted to do a buyout, and if they had agreed to that, they actually probably would have gotten a lot more money for their client. But again, out of principle and out of emotion, they said, no, absolutely not. She can't do the buyout. Now they're actually probably going to settle for about $250,000 less than they would have, because we're going to sell the property and the property's not financeable. So it's in significant need of repair. And if they'd brought us in early to do an evaluation of the property, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. They would have settled much, much earlier on. So please feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help and support and help move the needle forward and try to reduce some of that conflict and solve problems earlier on in the process.
That's really good advice. Do you see things in court orders? Do you see verbiage that either is not helpful, or you wish that there was maybe some additional verbiage that would have been helpful?
Couple of things that spring to my mind is that selling a property as is, and there are times when it is absolutely appropriate to sell a property at an as is situation, and there are other times when it is not. If we sell a property as is and it's something that we could have spent maybe $5,000 or $10,000 to do some minor repairs to the home and get them $20,000 or $30,000 more, then let us make that judgment call on what it should be done and what shouldn't be done. That's the areas that we're in expertise with. The other big thing that springs to mind is putting an on-market date in the initial orders. I got orders last week and it says they have to go on the market next Wednesday. And I just did the walkthrough yesterday. That's a really tight time frame to put all the ducks in a row. So allowing us yes, we want to have a timeline on getting things moving, but make it about having them meeting with us and having timeframes stack off of that, rather than when it's specifically on the multiple listing service. If they tell us it's going to go on the market on a Saturday, that could be really detrimental for the clients. When if we listed on a Wednesday or Thursday, it's going to open up a lot more viewing activity. So giving us the leeway to determine what that is, and then also pricing. Many times I've seen that they're pulling pricing off of Zillow or Redfin or Trulia, or putting in restrictions saying, well, it has to be within 10% of this value. I have to accept an offer if it's within this value. Well, if they're pulling it off of Zillow and the property's been owned for 30, 40 years, that may be a completely bogus number. In fact, it probably is. So let us come in and do the evaluation and make recommendations and guide the process of pricing and price reductions as necessary.
Yeah, that's very good. I want to go back to the as is because you gave a good example of sometimes you can put in a rather smaller investment and you can get $4 to $5 back for every dollar you put in.
Right.
Are there also instances where there are actually required repairs?
Absolutely. You know, in California, they have to have smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and water heater strapping. There also, depending on the financing of the buyer, may need to be peeling paint fixed or broken windows. And that, generally speaking, is a super inexpensive repair. I have a couple of listings right now with peeling paint. It's going to eliminate FHA and VA buyers.
Why does peeling paint eliminate FHA and VA buyers?
It eliminates it because, especially a lot of the older homes that were built were constructed and used lead-based paint. So FHA and VA want to protect little kids from picking up those paint chips and eating them and ingesting lead. So they want to make sure that there's no lead-based paint that's going to flake off and that basically that a kid is going to eat it. So, because little kids stick everything in their mouths. So that is where the big thing is there. And some of it's considered health and safety items. That's why even like broken windows, that could pose a hazard, right? A piece of that glass falls out. And that's a super inexpensive repair to do, but it can open up a lot more buyers if we take care of those items.
My guess is that most family law professionals and judges and family law litigants probably don't go around knowing that when properties are built before a certain period of time and there is peeling paint, that is a condition requirement because kids might ingest lead-based paint.
Right.
So again, this is one of the reasons why it's important to seek out a CDRE, seek out Melinda Elmer whenever you're in Long Beach. It's a world of information that you can bring to a case that's going to really impact the bottom line and the time frame. So
absolutely.
Excellent. Melinda, well, thank you very much. You're always giving with all of your knowledge and you're a wealth of information. You're a wonderful addition to our community. So thank you.
Thank you.